Go right here. I don't think our first guest here this morning needs any introduction, but he's going to get one anyway. And for anybody who is a guest who's not a client, because we have opened this up to people just to support them through this challenge. It's very much why this whole week y'all have heard me talking about getting Facebook groups together and your email lists together and your phone numbers together and contacting people and just continue to build your tribe through this. It's going to create opportunities to help people now and serve them now. And obviously even later, it puts you as the forefront of the leader, the person who helped to get them through all these challenges. So don't forget to keep in touch that way as well. If you have colleagues around you who are struggling, reach out to them. Be the voice, be the person who can support them in this time. There's something about helping other people that when all of a sudden you start helping other people, you stop worrying about other shit. So super important for you to realize that it's that shift in energy that can really make all the difference in every single day you have. So without further ado, I didn't get to go to TS here 2 weeks ago, so I haven't seen this guy in like a lifetime, what it feels like. But super glad that he agreed to do this. Super glad he agreed to be here on a day that, again, today was supposed to be our live program. What kind of foresight did I have to cancel it and put this on? Today was supposed to be our live program. It all works out. It always works out the way that it's supposed to. I'm super excited to have him here. I love this man. Super brilliant man. Always fun to hang out with. So now we get to hang out virtually. So a rousing round of applause for the one and only Dr. David Fletcher. See, look at that. You're getting virtual applause.
I am feeling the love virtually. And of course, it's wonderful to be invited, and it's wonderful to be with the people I care about. And I know that the way that the world works, literally in the last short while, is that the more we put effort out, the more we will get back. And I think that's one of the universalities that you have to give to get. And as a result of that, I'm thrilled that the online presence, Dr. Troy, that you're putting forward, especially, and you've really mastered, especially over the past few years, is the right place for everybody to be right now. And so, yeah, let's make a difference. How does that sound?
Yes, absolutely.
Now, I've got a bit of a story to share. With we're going to weave it into scanning, but you brought up total solution, and I think it's really important for anybody to know that there's power in the pack. And as a result of that, one of the things that we know, whether it's a bursting at the seams room, like you spoke at, I think one of the last times we saw one another in person was when you were speaking to like 800 people in a Parker conference. And then we start to get these smaller numbers, which is one-on-one, and you break bread with people literally over the breakfast and lunch and dinner at something called Total Solution. And the realities are is that when you get a congregation of chiropractors together, regardless of the differences that many people see on the online, or that you get these trolls that are talking about this, that, and the other thing, there is this beyond common thread that brings us all together. If we sat down and really started to ask people why they chose chiropractic over, for instance, like medicine or dentistry or other healthcare disciplines, it would be that there was something that drew them together, and they may not know what that is until they start to explore it a little better. But the truth is that they cared for people. And one of the things that matters is that as we start to care for people, we then start to elevate our excellence to try and say, how can we care better for people? And I think that the term adjustment is probably the most brilliant and expansive concept in any of the healthcare disciplines. I think that every time we pathologize a person's state of being, we move it down to the treatment model. And I think that if we really recognize the genius of chiropractic, it's that it immediately in its lexicon started to move away from the pathology and move it into this shift towards vitalism. And I think that if we take a look at the principle of being adjusted or adjusting someone, we start to recognize that there was this, and I say it again, this genius that was built into what it is we stand for. And the sad part is, and when you take a look at the long history of chiropractic, which is really only 125 years on, it's based upon some principles that have been around forever in human evolution, which is called adaptability and vitalism. We talk about neo or neurovitalism now, but the truth of it is that there has always been a movement at any time in human history to look inside versus looking outside. There has always been this sense of awe and wonder if you looked up at the stars and wondered, where do we come from? Why do they exist? Where do I fit into this universe? Whether I'm obviously projecting my belief system into what somebody who is a Neanderthal would look like, but hey, we get to do that. But there's this sense of awe and wonder of understanding that there's something bigger at play, and then the stardust has to become real in our lives. And of course we drag ourselves into the minutia that's everything from COVID-19 to traffic jams. And the realities is that at some point we are forced to look inwards. And so if I could look and try and say, what is the benefit of what's going on? I mean, there's innumerable benefits, right? For every wrong, there's a right that balances it out. That's the way we work. Commissions, omissions. One of the things about universal forces are that they are constructive and destructive at the same time. And when you take a look at the constructive opportunities, I took a picture. I'm not sure that your listeners or our viewership here knows, but I live right in the center of Toronto, and Toronto's a pretty big town. And I took a picture of walking this morning, and we're not in complete shutdown, but it's voluntary isolation right now. And there wasn't a car in the street. This is the main street. This is like Fifth Avenue, and there wasn't a car in the street. And it was sort of like, man, this is the most peaceful city I've ever lived in. Life. It was like, I love it. And so I wore a t-shirt today, which is, talking about the vagus nerve. And I thought what we could do today is maybe bounce around with the idea of this sense of being calm, which has been pushed upon us, fighting, pushing ourselves, and we have to be calm, not a bad thing. And talking about the sense that we have behaviors that match that sense of either being wired with adrenergic responses, the sympathetic dominant response, or we have behaviors that match this peaceful collective consciousness. And what's happening right now is that people are being forced out of their self-ish sense of adrenergic response and jumping into this sense of community and otherwise. And obviously it doesn't pay real well, but that's the other side of it, is that people are going to be forced to make different decisions about who they are, family and otherwise. So I thought we'd spend a little bit of time maybe taking one quick look at the whole idea of what it was like to live in a well-adjusted state, which is another way for saying coherence. And so if there's a few takeaway terms that associate with what we know is our path and our reality within chiropractic, the term coherence is the 2020 version of what our forefathers described as ease. And, we talked about states of ease, we talked about states of dishyphenated ease, and now we talk about states of coherence, which is full ease. And coherence is a long way from being perfect. Coherence is kind of like, that pendulum I talked about. It's kind of like that center point where you cross over between these two sort of conflicting states. But just imagine that model, that cosmology of where we're swinging from riding this wild pendulum way down at the bottom of the string. It's like, whoa, hang on, there's lots going on here, and there's like, what's going on, and we get drawn, and this is where CNN and Fox fight each other, and there's all this dichotomous response that's going on in here. And then you start to get adjusted. And you adjust your behavior, you adjust your thinking, you adjust your nervous system so you can adjust your behavior and thinking, and you start to get into it. And what happens is that if you just imagine, you start to traipse up the string a bit, you start to move up into that same swinging world. The world hasn't stopped swaying in its chaos. What happens is that you are upscale, you are adjusted up closer. And just look at, because it's shaped like a cone or like a triangle, just imagine that what you've got is this same world going on, but instead of riding the wild pendulum way, way, way down at the bottom of it, what you have is this dynamism of where you're swaying, but it's not nearly as far. And this is where coherence really is that coherence really means that you are less incoherent. And less incoherent in a functioning nervous system means that you can perform differently. And I put the word differently there because we judge to make ourselves either better or worse, but we perform differently and we perform with greater efficiency. And so that's the whole goal of being well adjusted, is move people. It's very simple, is move people up so that they have a 360 view of the world. So they're not, swimming with sharks down below. And the second thing is that we then give them this viewpoint so that they can observe the world differently through their own perspective and lens. And because, and Troy, this is where it gets really exciting, is because they're not wasting energy trying to hang on to that swaying wild pendulum that's just, they're just, imagine, I was watching a clip from, do you remember the movie Wall-E? Do you remember? Yeah, it was this, this futuristic one of where it's a Pixar. And Wall-E falls in love with another, with one of these other robots that's out there in a garbage world that's there, and he hops onto a spaceship as it's taking off, and he's being dragged by this spaceship through the whole thing. And I thought, man, that's what it feels like when you're riding this wild pendulum. Man, you're hanging onto a spaceship. You're out of control. And so, you have on this one side this ridiculous momentum that's taking you out of control, and lying within you is this coherence that you just have to tap into. And what it allows you to do is just start to center your perspective. And it pays huge dividends, because then this is what I was saying, Troy, is that the minute that you start building efficiencies into the system, it unlocks the ability to be creative. And what I wrote the other day, and it just dawned, this was my thought flash, is that creativity finds the open space. And when you create an open space, like being more coherent, then the joy of what happens is that you start to experience aha moments. You start to go, whoa, I can see things with a different light. I can be there. So that's how I've always positioned. I wouldn't say always. That's how I have learned over the past period of time, thankfully the second half of my career, that the goal of being a chiropractor is so much more than getting caught in the whirlpool of people's symptoms. The absolute joy that I have is meeting people with where they're at, acknowledging through an empathetic perspective, not sympathetic, but empathetic perspective, that there is something out of sync, out of coherence in their world, and that a functioning and clear nervous system will give them the edge to allow them to see their way out of the problem. And I say that because I came to realize that their problem is their problem, not mine. And that was really hard, because, man, I was put on this earth to save the world. I was going to put everybody on my back. Absolutely everybody. You got a hangnail, like I said before, you're going to be on my back. You have a missing a limb on my back. And the truth is that when you embrace this innate principle, then the joy of it really then becomes knowing that you can walk side by side with them and be their trusted advisor and their support mechanism, but you don't have to own their problems. You just have to be there to guide them and support them. And that was hugely empowering. And the last thing I'll say on this, gospel and epistle that I'm sharing right now, is that in this time of really deep chaos and incoherence, we'll use that term, and where we can't put our hands on people, reaching out to them like you're doing right here and what we're doing is one of those things that allows us to be the other side of what chiropractic is really all about, which is off the table. And as BJ always used to say, is adjusting them from, C1 up. And I think that when we start to realize that these quiet spaces we have now allow us and push us to do it, not a bad thing. Well, at least we can make it a better thing, shall we say. So what are you thinking these days?
Well, I just posed the question to everybody, like, hey, what are you taking away from this? I mean, I wrote down, and recall if you and I have had this conversation before, but it's an affirmation I've had for a while, which is I'm a leader, not a savior.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy for us to absorb everybody else's problems. And, it's you taking care of people this week. You have people coming in the office. Everybody has essentially the same problem, where you're going to hear one or two or three of the same problems across the board, and you want so bad to help them. But then the only thing that you can really do is lead. That's it. You can just lead and be like, as I've said, the beacon of hope. Be the person who's shining the light, saying, hey, here's the possibility. Here's what you can do. Here's how you can get through this. And here's some things that I'm doing that are helping me to manage and cope through this, or adapt to this, or adjust to this. And I love, for me personally, I wrote down, because adjust, we always do think chiropractic, right? And it's like, but there's these derivatives that come along with this. It adjusts. What does chiropractic help to do? It adjusts behavior. It adjusts response. It adjusts the nervous system. Like there's the way to take that word and really start to understand how this is affecting everything in life from just a simple word of adjust. What I'm hoping people are taking away are the single words that you're writing: perform differently, efficiency, coherence. These are some strong words that if you can turn around, and for everybody who works with me, like turn this into a red apple. If you can turn those words into a red apple for your patients to understand, that's just going to support them either more, whether you have your hands on them or not, whether you get to adjust them or you're in Canada and you can't put your hands on anyone. Kentucky, can't put your hands on anyone right now. You got to stay home, right? It's I believe there's certain counties in California, it's the same way. New York, same way. So if you can't get your hands on them, you can still adjust them and lead in adjusting behaviors. They have to take the action, but you can lead in adjusting behaviors. You can lead in adjusting different ways of thinking. You can lead in adjusting, right? Multiple things that people can learn from you from the seat that you're sitting in right now. I mean, this is it. This is what I've been talking about all week to everybody. Like, just get a group of people together, do a Zoom talk, and support them. And then show up again next week and support them again. Put on a talk. Have your colleagues that are here come and be guest speakers to share with your patients. So now they get a third party view of chiropractic and its benefits in their lives and things that they can be doing. And you keep building your tribe from here. You adjust, right? We talk so much about adapting, but I'm just adjusting to what's taking place every single step of the way. That's me personally. We've got stuff off the side here, Fletch. We must lead, not save. Having a clear nervous system will help people and us through the chaos. Their problem is their problem. Straight up. I love it. Creativity finds the open space. Yeah, that was a good one too. That's going to be a Fletch meme. You're going to see that on my feed today. No, you'll see it today. I love that quote. You will see that today. Efficiency creates the opportunity for creativity to be activated. Performance with greater efficiency. Guide them. Don't own their problems. There's some takeaways here, dude.
Well, it's been a reflective time, and the other thing is that when we stand in front of people and we assume senses of leadership, and I'm not just talking about Troy, you and I standing in front of groups and otherwise and leading groups. I'm talking about our members here who are practitioners and leading people within their community. There's a responsibility that goes that you are continuously reflective as to what your role is, and it should be ever evolving. And this really comes down to this sense of certainty. And one of the saddest parts that we see, I mean, I love watching ahas come, and I watch people pivot in their lives. And I think that's where coaching is so critical, is that you really need somebody to, not to catch you when you fall, but to guide you so you pivot correctly. And, one of the things that is so frustrating for me is that, we collectively, carry this moniker called doctor, which is quite an elevated status within society and within education. And yet at the same time, there's this sense that many people forget that life is supposed to be, and certainly professionally, we're supposed to be persistently learning how to be better. And, I've driven, myself to be very active on the academic side. And I like that, that's for me, but I think it's a responsibility we all have to understand what's current, and also to take the healing perspectives that that are our history, and move them into today's, lexicon and conversations, just like we did with ease and coherence. So I was going to maybe touch base, Troy, a little bit, just for talking with people on a relative basis, instead of, talking in the ether, but maybe bring it down and maybe show a few scan concepts so that we could, support them when they use the technology, or if they're learning about it, they get a chance to understand that there are these today technologies that interface with the stress in the nervous system, and with deductive reasoning, with inductive reasoning, with evidence-informed approaches, what you are, and evidence-based approaches, what you have is an opportunity to build this beautiful cosmology of everything we just talked about beforehand, and make it real to them by showing it, showing their inside lives in Technicolor or in scores, so that they have something to work from and goals to work to. And, I thought we could start maybe with a little bit of, I can race through a little bit of a deck here, but I want to get to the heart rate variability, if that makes sense to you guys.
Yeah. Hit the old share button down there, and you have control, my friend.
Okay, so the trouble with the share button, let me see what I've got here, is that I have my screen up, and you can't see that, and I don't have a share button on this particular screen. So give me a moment, and we'll see what happens.
If it's not on there, just scroll your mouse down there, and it might pop up.
Okay.
That's what it does for me.
It did not for me there, which is a shame. And let me see if I can do this now. Dismiss. Give me a moment. My Zoom comes up. Got it here. And we will hit the share.
Yeah.
And hopefully I can share my desktop, which would be the right thing, right? Here's a surprise. There's like 30 points open, so I'm not sure which one I want to show. That one from last night. No, I'm just kidding. You know what? If desktop one, let me do share here in desktop one, consistent preferences. Bear with me, everybody. I apologize for this. It's not giving me. It's asking me to. Sorry about this. It's asking me to change my preferences, my system preferences, and I don't think you guys want to watch me stumble along with that. So let me get back to just a conversation we have here.
You want to send them to me while you're talking, and I can just pop them up?
What a great idea. And let me just pop that in to Troy. Go, and I'll attach a file, and we'll definitely work from there. Oh, just hang on. Well, it didn't save the way it should have, but I'm going to send you this, and I can work out of a deck that I used it from. Okay, Troy. So I'll tell you which one to work from.
Yeah, no problem.
And we'll see how it goes. Anyhow,
I had to do a talk years ago in Oklahoma City, and their system, the clicker didn't work from stage, so you had to literally tell the guy who was running the program to click next slide. So I had it going. Go figure. I had the whole crowd cheering with me.
Oh yeah.
Next slide. So I'd look at it and be like, "What's next? Next slide!" And then he'd hit the button for the next slide. So we just had to turn it into something that was fun.
Scroll down to 1 or 2, and then I'll take it from there, or just scroll right to the HRV slides, which you'll know. But let me for the members that are on today, let me give you a little bit of a window. When we take a look at the central nervous system, there are obviously 3 divisions of it. There's the sensory, there's the motor, and then there's the autonomic. And one of the things that chiropractic is renowned for is its ability to change the tone within the functioning nervous system. And so the tone really reflects to that idea of coherence that we were talking about. And what we know is that if we look at incoherence in the motor nervous system, we're bound to see something on the way that the motor nervous system keeps the muscles firing. And that means that we're going to look at an EMG. But when we go and take a look at the tone within the autonomic nervous system, the next thing that we offer is this idea of regionally and globally. Now, regionally, chiropractors figured this out in 1923, 1924, that you could scan a spine and a nervous system using temperature to take a look at how the regulation of temperature was supposed to give us this window inside the autonomic regional nervous system. Now, they took it a little step too far as to where they started to take a look at that. Thanks, Troy. And so if we can scroll up, I don't know what the one just above the babies getting checked is. Can you just, okay. So just the babies getting checked is good. Why don't we just make that one with that. One of the things that we know is that the global aspect of the central nervous system is, yeah, there we go. Thanks, man. Appreciate that. And we'll take it right from there. Good. The global aspect is something that we need to monitor, because what we're doing is looking at the set points of how stress has accumulated. So I want you all to get this, is that stress is not an event that is singular. Stress is an event that literally, and this is a takeaway, stains the nervous system. Okay, it becomes memorized. It becomes canalized within the brain. Now, remember, stress is not only bad; it is good and bad. I mean, workout stress, by our perception, is good and bad. And as I said earlier, we put the good and bad perceptions on on stress, but those are our own personal perspectives. Stress is stress. And stress means that we push the limits, we work outside of the control zone, and the body then has to adapt. And so stress and adaptation are the key principles as to what we're observing within the nervous system. Now, if you just took a person off the street and checked their HRV, it'd be like checking somebody's blood pressure. You wouldn't know what range was good or bad. So if somebody came in with 200 over 100 and you had no idea that, let's say, the mythical 120 over 80 was good, or at least within a healthy parameter, you might not know that 200 over 100 meant anything. So early on in the use of HRV, there were standards as to what cardiologists thought HRV should be, but they meant nothing to a chiropractor. So CLA decided, and this was myself and Dr. Kent, decided early on in the days that we would create a normative database. And so we took 2,468 scans of well-adjusted people. And what we did then was do a scatter plot to try and determine what a well-adjusted central autonomic nervous system looked like. And we worked with the guys who began this whole journey in HRV. There was a guy whose name was Roland McCready, who created HeartMath. So the PhD-isms and the chiropractic-isms were built into our normative database. And just scroll to the next one, please. And so as a result of that, we were able to plot where well-adjusted people should plot on this graph. And that would be the green zone, or the green box. And that represents a well-adjusted person. Now, if you take a look at the graph to the left, and you start to see that rhythmic heartbeat, and you look at the blue line under it, and you start to see this blue line that's there, you would note, even if you were just noting, you would say there's a lot of symmetry in that. The amplitude is kind of mid-range in both of those, and you would be led to believe that there was ease within this system. But one of the things that we know is that the body is persistently trying to set itself to that efficient state, and it will do anything to try and work its way to that in the present, but it's carrying around the dead gorilla on its back, and it's carrying out all those stressors that have been building up for many, many years. And so even though we have all of this beautiful patterning that's on this rhythmic red line and blue line graph that's here, take a look to the right, and you'll see that little white dot that's down to the bottom left. And you can put your cursor on that white dot, Troy, just so everybody gets a chance to see it. And you can see that it's a long way away from that green zone. And so this is the way the person, listen to this is really important. This is what this person's coherent state is at the moment, meaning that they're at ease at this moment. And what it really tells us, that if you take a look at the management, is that anything left of the line means that they're sympathetic dominant. And when they're low, it means that they have very low horsepower within their central nervous system. And so this means that this set point, captured at a very quiet state and at a very, what they call new normal coherent state, is really, and this is terrifying, is what that person's new normal is that they are subluxated. They have adapted to the maladapted state. And this is where people get desperately sick. This means that they have very limited reserve. They have very, very vulnerable states. Remember, they have a hair trigger because they don't have much reserve, so that they're going to emotionally, physically, and mentally react to the next minor stressor that comes in their life. They just can't cope as well. And then what we also know is that if you sit to the left of this line, and especially if you're that low, two very, very, research states exist. I mean, we can talk about longevity. That's a given. Anybody who has low HRV is predictably has a lower lifespan. But when you take a look here, this left plot is pro-inflammatory and reduced immune responsiveness. That is in the literature everywhere you look. So we don't like that. We don't like that at all. And here is the hope that we talk about, is that study after study, the Haas study was with Russell was the one that I participated in, and it showed that there was, it was a very small number, but it was nine or 10 patients where we reviewed their tracking over a period of time adjustments on this. And we noted that in 10 out of 10 subjects that this advanced towards that more coherent green box state. When you take a look at the original Zhang studies that came from Troy's alma mater at Logan, this was some of the earliest work that was done, and they noticed we call it SDNN, which is standard deviation normal to normal, when we're looking at the relationship of this data towards HRV. And they noticed that the SDNN was positively improved with a lowering of the heart rate after one visit, after a month of care, and after a year of care. So there was this progression that said, and this is the most important thing you have to hear, is that there is a stickiness to what we do. Anybody can kick somebody in the shin and get a neurological event. And anybody can do some meditative deep breathing and see that it changes their HRV and elevates their HRV. But the truth is that what you want resiliency, not just reserve, but you want resiliency to be built into any care plan you're putting in. And so you want to see that there's a stickiness to the change. And this is one of the reasons that I created the core score. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we go down this path. But the core score represents this combination of regional and global autonomics and motoricity within the functioning motor system. And we combine those together so that we can look at the interplay of the entire totality of the nervous system, of the functioning nervous system. And what we can then work with is this idea is the person, generally sticking to a better coherent state as they move closer to that ideal 100. So, when we take a look at the advancements that we're talking about, chiropractic by itself is a brilliant idea. I mean, its simplicity is genius. Its outcomes are beyond remarkable. And now we understand that there is this stickiness to change, which means that not only do we make them feel better, not only do we give them the sense that there is improvement, but that they have a new set point that they live from. And that's huge, because it means that a well-adjusted person is indeed, on the very practical side, higher immunity, less responsiveness to inflammatory agents, and finally, that they are behaviorally calmer. And so I wrote down sort of the grandfather of non-chiropractic, but socialization using HRV as its trigger, and it's Stephen Porges' work, who created something called the vagal brake, or the polyvagal theory. And what he talked about was that a vagal brake, and I'll talk about that in a moment, a vagal brake promotes self-soothing behaviors and calm states. So you get the fact that this person that we're looking at here is wired to the adrenergic response. Their sympathetics are like locked in on fire. But remember innate is saying all the time, wait a minute, I'm going to do the best I can with what I have to try and draw you back to a more coherent or a state of ease. And you're saying, well, wait a minute, why can't it do it spontaneously? I get the fact that there's limitation of matter, and you can't grow a leg if you cut a leg off. Like, I get that. But on the other hand, this is primal internal functioning. Why can't the body reset itself with this whole principle? And this is where the subluxation comes into it, is the body can't reset itself because it's lost the vagal brake, B-R-A-K-E. And by living out with a sympathetic dominant state, it isn't just that you are over-sympatheticized, if that's such a word. It's that you have lost the modulating influence of the vagus nerve, which is to break or pull back or modify the sympathetic tone within the system. And a vagal brake, and this is where chiropractic becomes so cool, is associated with parasympathetic tone. And so the parasympathetic responses being blunted mean that the dominant state of sympathetic atonia is locked in. It can't pull itself out. And it's like driving a Ferrari with bicycle brakes. You just can't hit the corners well. And so here's where it gets really interesting. And again, nobody really has, I sort of posited this to a number of researchers, and they were like, jaw drops and everything else. But when you look at the impact of the adjustive models, the techniques that we have that have stood the test of time, they primarily focus on the two inputs, which are subocciput and sacral. And the reason that those are so dominant and have stood the test of time primarily versus, say, diversified, which is just a glorified physiotherapy model, is that when you get a specific adjustment suboccipitally and into the sacral, you stimulate the two regions as to where there are parasympathetic feeds. So when we take a look at the vagal brake, we know that the vagus nerve, which is the 10th motor cranial, when we watch how it transits through the upper cervical region, we can see that there is influence of the physical nature of the upper cervical spine. And at the same time, we recognize that we can influence with a mechanical thrust or otherwise the tone of that firing sequence. Epstein did an amazing job. I did an interview with Edmond Jonquière and Srideep, I think it was Pashivi, but they were systems engineers and mathematicians who were looking at the wave formats that were being induced by NSA, and they were using our EMG systems to sort of modify those. But you could tell that when the spine was adjusted, that there was this immediate intimate relationship with neurology, and in this case, the central nervous system, and in this case, the parasympathetic tone. The minute that you engage the parasympathetic tone, the sympathetic dominance begins to wane. And so when you're taking a look at tracking somebody's improvement, you should be seeing it starting to go midline. You should be seeing that there is an elevation of the amount of horsepower within the system, and you should see that there is this blending of moving up and moving in on this particular graph. That is reasonable. That is expected. That should be happening. And when it doesn't happen in a sequential way, you have to remember to call out the patient, because it's not that your adjustments aren't, well, it could be, but we're hoping that that's not the case, is that your adjustments aren't targeting where the subluxation is that they are going out and living a subluxated lifestyle as they leave your office. And as powerful as we are, we need their collaboration to make sure that they are winning the game at all times. So this also gives you the certainty to go into a conversation in a progress exam or in a comparative exam or even 10 years down the way in a continuation exam, and have a conversation with them about what are they doing to stay well. We began part of this conversation, which was, don't carry me on your shoulder. I want you to carry forward on your own. And I've always built my care plans with this. I have a 3-part care plan model, which uses different terminologies. I sort of broke away from that, physical therapy model, which was relief, correction, maintenance. And I put forward a new model, which I termed the path to wellness, but it was where your first goal was release, R-E-L-E-A-S-E, versus relief. we needed to release the tension within this habit that you're looking at here. The second was reorganize, meaning that we needed to work with them so that when they left, they had this stickiness of care, that their core score would improve, that their lifestyles were matching, an adjusted lifestyle model. And finally, that we started to get to this point where where the coherence was there now, and they were sticky enough, and we entered into that most glorious phase of where our goal was slip and check to make sure that they were revitalizing. So it went from release to reorganize to revitalize. And I know that, listen, it's a little heady. Some people just want things, broken things corrected. But at the end of the day, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed delivering that type of care. And if I was enjoying delivering that type of care, the expectations for myself were far exceeding what they could ever concept. And that was my belief system, was that they were coming to me first as a doctor. And as soon as I could take that frigging cape off, I would. I just couldn't stand the cape of being a doctor. And we moved them from being patients to being practice members. And in that case of moving them from patients to practice members, I stopped having to be their doctor, and I became their trusted advisor. And that, I guess you could say coach, if you want to say, down the path, if you will. But the truth of it is that the intent changed from release to reorganize into revitalization. And, when I left practice, and Troy, I think you kind of know this, but when I left practice, I had sort of a huge legendary practice. When I left practice, my PVA, granted I was handing off a lot of, new patients there, was just touching 300. And, the realities is that somebody who walked in the door was going to see me 300 times in the course of their life. And that wasn't that we had high front end, we did. We saw people intensely in the release and reorganize, but it was really about longevity, is that people had no reason to leave. And, that's sort of built on the fact that I was there for 3 decades. But, it doesn't hurt when you've got a bit of longevity yourself in that practice. But you can well appreciate that the joy of a practice like that is that you are working with families instead of crises. And, even in times like this, I imagine that my practice would be, I'd figure a way to be out there with them, even if we had to work on a one-by-one basis. Questions that we should answer, Troy, before we lose our window here?
Let me do this real quick so I can go over here. If anybody has questions, just pop them in the chat box. That way we don't mess around. Major backdrop, background noise, etc. Any questions? Any questions? Any questions? Any comments? Any comments? Any comments?
There it is.
Oh, what's he got there, Kristen? What does he want to ask? You can unmute him.
That's beautiful.
He's got a question, but I don't know. Oh, he's not sure. Okay. He's not sure. I would love to hear
he wants to know what the neurotransmitters are affiliated with this parasympathetic side of things.
I would absolutely love to hear his question. Whatever it is going to be brilliant.
I have a question.
Yes.
So you mentioned the vagal break was self-soothing state, and then something else that I missed. It was like self-soothing state and some blah blah, or it was like blah 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 self-soothing state. Can you go back to that?
Can you fill in the blah 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 part? Notes don't work well with blah 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 in there.
Well, the story that is never going to come out the way that it came out the first time. I'll see if I can riff on that and then see what we can pull out of it. So the sympathetic dominant state is modified by the vagal break. Now, the vagal break was posited by Stephen Porges in his polyvagal theory. And one of the things that happens, and just so you know, it's not a teeter-totter event. It's not like, okay, we throw too much weight on this side, and as soon as we overweight this, it balances it out. It's much more of a set point. If we cut the sympathetic nerves going to the heart, they would still continue to beat at about 15% of what their value is, because there is the circulating neurotransmitters that are affiliated with it. But the realities are is that we are primed, if you will, meaning that we are built genetically and phylogenetically to constantly modify a sympathetic state. So when we evolved through the phylogeny that was associated, from avian brain to reptilian brain and all the rest of it, other way around, then what happened is that we became capable of, in a mammalian brain, what happened is we became capable of responding to crisis. And as we responded to crisis, what happened is that we started to modify and build in a parasympathetic side to the central nervous system. And so the vagal brake was designed specifically to work in a very robust way to modify an event. But here's what happened, is that in the evolutionary tree, the one event that would happen, which was the saber-toothed tiger jumping out of the woods and going to consume you, stopped being a one-time event. And as we gained society and as we gained this relationship with constant stressors that were there, we started to have a more robust parasympathetic responsiveness. And it wasn't evolutionarily programmed to do that. And so we've been playing catch up as a not a society, but as an evolutionary thrust for a very, very long time. The trouble with, and we've done well, we've done very well, we've survived, which is the adaptive responsiveness that we see. But you take the practical to this, and one of the sort of limitations on the practical is, let's take CrossFit for instance, is that CrossFit by design is meant to stress the hell out of you for a very momentary response. And as a result of that, you're supposed to be able to recover. But when you put CrossFit on top of an already whacked out world, and the rest of it, then it becomes the stressor in itself to everybody. And one of the things that we know is that to calm a person down, there's a couple of things in performance enhancing drugs. One of the reasons that PEDs are so effective is that they work, in this case, through the neurohormonal axis to artificially induce a quieted state. They bring away they remove the inflammatory responsiveness. They promote this excessive response that is triggered against the cortisol. And so they actually, and they do some muscle fiber building and the rest of it, but the primary reason you use a PED is so that you can induce this rest and recovery state. It means that you can train harder and artificially recover. When we give somebody who's already subluxated and we put them onto a CrossFit response, then the next thing that we have to realize is that they need to either get adjusted or they need to watch their HRV and not train as hard until they have balanced back their HRV. And so there is some value. Just so you know, HRV is embedded in everything from Oura rings to iWatches and everything else that go along with that. There you go. And there's some good value because you can't track yourself by coming into the chiropractic office 24 hours a day. The Neuropulse that we put together was specific to the level of research grade collection. And the value of doing that is that, and you guys might not know this, but it's very, very difficult to get a string of heartbeats using what's called PPG, which is this photoplethysmography used in iWatch, but very infantile ways. And when we put our hand in a sensor and we capture that unmoving hand, then what happens is that there is a clean string of data. So you saw that red line, that's a clean string of data. Every time the hand moves or anytime there is an emotional outburst or otherwise, you're gonna interrupt that string and it's gonna give you false data. And so one of the things that is built into all of those algorithms that are associated with the eye beats and everything else and Elite HRV is that they have an algorithm which snips out the beats, which snips out the wrong beats that are in there. And there's nothing wrong with that because everybody does a little bit of modification, but it is so uncontrolled, the collection on a phone application or on a chest, especially the polar chest walls. Those give you really, really, interfered with data. You have to really fix the hand, which is why we have it on a platform. And you have to be able to control the beat-to-beat intervals if you're going to make a clinical tracking mechanism to go along with it. However, that said, and we've got a new app that's going to be matching the Neuropulse that's called Bounce Back. And the Bounce Back app is designed specifically to augment so that I can take Troy and say, Troy, go and work out and do whatever it is. But you're going to stream that data live into your health record at CLA or in your office through CLA. And then we'll apply really cool mathematical algorithms, which are going to track not only the time we do it, but the collections in between examinations in the office for the purpose of understanding trends. So, and I know we've got only a couple of moments left, but one of the things that is really exciting is that we can use technologies to support the moment-to-moment adjustments that we want to put in, focusing on the parasympathetic inputs. We can look at trends. Changeability is the hallmark of our first level of care, and trends are what we're searching for, so we can track that. And the third dimension is that now we can use patient-driven data that is between visits that is going to allow us to have all of this brilliant collection going on. And chiropractic is going to stand amazingly tall for what it is we stand for. Because I'm telling you, what I get to see behind the scenes is I get to track the data, and what you don't get to see is where I see, world of data that's coming in. I'll leave you with this, is that you have no idea how powerful you are. You have no idea how much influence you have with those little babies when you start to watch their HRV come in. You have no idea how subluxated little babies are. You have no idea how induced stress, like CrossFit, which I've said is there. You have no idea what emotional distress causes in people, but you have every idea that when you put somebody on the table and you find a specific place to adjust them, that you literally arouse their innate and unbelievably reset their world. So don't ever diminish what you think you're doing. Just know that you are doing it and that you are changing everything. And so you look at work like Havix, and you look at work like Haas and Russell, and you take a look at where the fun stuff is going, instead of, oh great, another low back study. And you start to take a look and see what's going on. This is genius of what we're doing. And hopefully as we take the next generation of chiropractors down this path, we'll be that much further ahead. So, final note, join the big game. If you've ever learned anything about where we stand right now in society, is that we have declining numbers because there's irrelevancy in managing back pain through chiropractic. It works, but it's not what defines us. What defines us is adaptability, coherence, and everything we talked about on the front end. Do everything you can to be the deliverer of hope, but responsible, evidence-informed hope that you can deliver every time. Don't shy away from taking on the hardest cases, because at the very, very bottom of that is a subluxation that can be addressed. That I have learned. And with that, high five.
So, virtual high, boom. So a couple comments. Dr. Brian paraphrased, as powerful as we are, we need their collaboration in order to help them achieve an optimal state of health.
It's true.
Adrian said, release, reorganize, revitalize versus relief, corrective, wellness. Great stuff. Aaron said, driving a Ferrari and using bicycle brakes. Do you have any examples of scans which shows adrenal fatigue?
Yeah, so if you just pull that one up real quickly.
The one, okay.
Just that last green box one.
Okay.
Adrenal fatigue is actually the opposite of what we saw there, is that that dot will typically move to the right-hand side of the line, but be up a little higher in the yellow. So maybe a little lower than that and more middle, right there. And that's about where adrenal fatigue happens. And what we find is that when somebody comes, when they fall from grace, if you want to use that biblical term, but as they come out of this sort of green zone, what happens is they lock into this sympathetic dominant to the left of the line, but up sort of parallel to where Troy is, but on the other side. And then innate takes over, and innate sort of says, well, I'm going to do everything I can, so that they tend to take you out of your game. You either become, sick with the experience, or become adaptive to the experience. And what we see is that there's a leveling out, and sometimes when it levels out, it brings them, spontaneously closer to the midline. There's enough horsepower in the system to do some self-adjustments. But eventually that little bit of jiggle self-adjustment starts to fatigue the system. And once we start to get adrenal fatigue coming in, which is sort of a latent state of it, we start to have a more high parasympathetic plot, but that doesn't mean it's better. It means that you have low sympathetic tone. It means that you can't respond. And anybody who's had adrenal fatigue knows this, is that you have lowered adrenergic responsiveness. So you go to run when you're adrenal fatigued in the morning, and you've got nothing in your tank. You just are exhausted. You can't meet the stress of running by even engaging it. So you feel short of breath. You feel everything that's associated with low sympathetic tone. Your muscles don't fire. You get muscle aches. You become fatigued. You start to sweat profusely because of that. And that is adrenal fatigue at its. Believe me, I've lived in that. It's a terrible state. And what happens then is that constant stress of being in adrenal fatigue then drifts down to where that left dot is, to where you see it on the left side. So it's an ever evolving, I refer to it as sort of the falling leaf syndrome. It sort of falls and they kind of do a little bit of this, but you eventually end up here. And we don't get a lot of people on the bottom right quadrant. So Troy, just to the bottom right quadrant. We don't get a lot of people down here, because just think of what that is that they have no reserve and they have no responsiveness to stress, which means they are a fully wounded gazelle on the Serengeti. They just do not have anything left. And as a result of that, we just don't get a lot of those in a chiropractic office. Those typically are, in a medical reserve that's in there. So hopefully that helps.
Aaron, does that help answer it? I can't see him right now, so did he nod? Yeah. Okay, there's the head nod. Okay, cool. And then I was just thinking, Liz, did you get your blah blah blahs filled in?
Not particularly, but it's being recorded, so I'll just go back.
Phew.
Okay.
But I like the CrossFit example because I have a CrossFit gym, and I tell my athletes that you can't CrossFit and do this.
Yeah, there's a time and a place.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool. Anyone else have any questions and or comments? Oh, Chris did the fake. Did you see Chris do the fake? He went right for his head. That was good, dude. That was the fake out. I like it. That's like going to dinner with somebody and they go, "Oh no, I got this," and they start to like reach for their wallet and you're like, "No, I got it." They're like, "Okay, good, you take it."
I think we went to a steakhouse in Dallas that turned out one time.
What's that?
I think there was a steakhouse in Dallas that
I believe there was. God, that was good though. All right. So let me see. Brian. Oh, but Brian does say this. We've seen several lower right quadrant folks lately.
Yeah. Well, God bless them. They need you more than anybody, because the next step for them is not the chiropractic office.
Right. Okay. All right, folks. I think that's everybody. Dude, thank you so much. Oh, it's fantastic. You're more than welcome to stay around. Tracy's up next.
I think I might. I just have to put a few fires out, but that's my life. Right, but I'll put myself on mute and hand myself over to the one and only.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. I love you. And this was Leah looked at me the other night. We talked about this. She's like this is like, what better time? Who could have planned a better time to have a 2-day summit online and have no idea what was going to be coming, for everybody. And I think this is a great opportunity for people to dig in, because the information we've covered in the last 2 days, I know with Tracy, is all about, not just getting through this and thriving, but on the other side of this, people are going to need even more help. And you can't be picking up the pieces come 3 or 4 or 5 weeks from now. You got to be running and ready to play this game and serve at a higher level. So everybody here is here to produce and build their businesses and their lives. And this was perfect. So thank you so much.
You always have it. Take it easy, my man.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.